his first public sermon in almost 5 years, Iran's supreme leader Khamenei is leading prayers in central Tehran on Friday, as announced on the Islamic Republic's official news agency website. The speech comes at the commemoration ceremony for the late Hassan Nasrallah, leader of the Lebanese movement Hezbollah, killed in a targeted Israeli strike 1 week ago. It also comes 3 days after Iran's Revolutionary Guards fired some 200 missiles onto Israel in retaliation of Nasrallah's death, with the Iranian military releasing official footage of the attack on Thursday. In a conference, Khamenei said he would talk on the situation in the Middle East soon, but it remains unclear if the leader will choose to do so during the Friday prayers. In the meantime, he claimed that American and some European presence in the Middle East region is the cause of war and tension.
If they rid the region of their presence, no doubt these conflicts, wars, and clashes will completely go away. Countries in this region are able to manage themselves and live together in peace.
Iran-backed Hamas and Hezbollah are part of other armed groups in the Middle East which form an axis of resistance opposed to Israel and its ally, the US. Iran has warned the United States against any further intervention, threatening a harsh response. Washington claims it's in talks with Israel about a possible retaliation of Iran's missile attack.
We're not looking for a wider regional conflict. We're not seeking war with any group or organization or country in the region. We are certainly talking to them about their response.
With US President Joe Biden insinuating on Thursday potential plans to strike Iranian oil.
The US is discussing strikes on Iran's oil facilities as retaliation for Tehran's missile attack on Israel. That's according to President Joe Biden on Thursday. Israel is weighing its options after Iran launched its largest ever assault on Tuesday. Biden was asked whether he would support Israel striking Iran's oil facilities.
We're in discussion with that. I think that would be a little, anyway.
His comments contributed to a surge in global oil prices due to the rising Middle East tensions. The president also emphasized that no immediate action was planned, but reassured that Israel would respond to Iran's aggression. A US official said Washington does not believe Israel has decided yet how to respond to Iran. However, on Wednesday, Biden said he would not support any Israeli strike on Iran's nuclear sites. Meanwhile, Israel continued to target Hezbollah in Lebanon, launching new airstrikes on Beirut. Israel appeared to be targeting Hezbollah strongholds with reports of heavy bombardment in the Dayeh area. Residents say Israel ordered people to leave their homes in parts of the district. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed Iran will pay for Tuesday's missile attack, and Washington said it would work with its longtime ally to ensure Iran faced severe consequences. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, speaking in Doha, said on Thursday that Tehran would be ready to respond. Israel says its operations in Lebanon aim to help tens of thousands of its citizens to return home after areas near its northern border were forced to evacuate by Hezbollah attacks during the Gaza war. Meanwhile, over 1.2 million Lebanese have been displaced, with nearly 2,000 casualties reported since the escalation of Israeli attacks in the past year, primarily in the last 2 weeks.
Foreign nationals in Lebanon have been scrambling to get out as Israel's campaign against the Iran-backed Hezbollah intensifies. One man told Reuters that flights are fully booked, with the earliest available in 10 days. Others turned to the sea, with hundreds arriving in Turkey via ferry after flights were cancelled. The rush comes as Israel sent troops into southern Lebanon after 2 weeks of intense airstrikes, some hitting in the heart of Beirut after a year of clashes with Hezbollah. Governments worldwide have been urging their citizens to leave and drawing up plans to get them out. Dozens of Greeks and Greek Cypriots boarded this Greek military aircraft in Beirut. Those on board, like many others fleeing, spoke of the growing chaos and terror caused by the bombing campaign this week. The plane dropped off close to 40 people in Cyprus, about 125 miles west of Lebanon, before continuing on to Athens.
There was bombing and we could hear it.
Libyan Cypriot citizen Gigi Khalifa says the last week has been tough, especially for her children.
I just feel bad for all those people I left behind, all those friends, my kids' friends. I don't know if we're going to see them again or not. and hopefully they are in safe places. I miss you all, guys. The kids miss you as well. Yeah.
In France, a Franco-Lebanese grandmother reunited with two of her grandchildren after trying to get her family on a plane to Paris for 2 weeks. May Dea says her family in Lebanon lives in a neighborhood that was completely bombed, forcing them to flee to the mountains.
They lost everything. The kids are arriving, and look, I have to bring their things. They have nothing on them.
Israel on Thursday urged residents to evacuate more than 20 towns in southern Lebanon in the escalating conflict that has drawn in Iran and risks drawing in the United States.
This was the scene in Beirut on Thursday morning after Israel struck the heart of the Lebanese capital. One resident said the building hit was used as an emergency center. The latest attack comes after the Israeli forces suffered their deadliest day in a year on the Lebanese front. The strikes had targeted a building in the district of Bashura, a security source said. It was only a few hundred meters from Parliament and was the closest an Israeli strike has come to the central downtown district of Beirut. A Hezbollah-linked civil defense group said 7 of its staff, including 2 medics, had been killed in what Israel called a precise airstrike. On Wednesday, Israel said 8 soldiers were killed in ground combat in South Lebanon and promised to hit back hard. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian warned against silence in the face of Israel's warmongering. He added that any type of military attack will be met with a response by armed forces. On Thursday, Israel's military urged residents of over 20 towns in South Lebanon to evacuate their homes immediately, suggesting that another Israeli operation designed to further weaken Hezbollah is imminent. In almost a year of cross-border fighting, more than 1,900 people have been killed in Lebanon. Most of the deaths occurred in the past 2 weeks, according to Lebanese official statistics.
A Russian-guided bomb hit this apartment building in Ukraine's Kharkiv late on Wednesday, local officials said. At least 10 people were said to be injured, including a 3-year-old boy. Regional Governor Oleg Sinigubov said the bomb hit between the 3rd and 4th floors of the building in the city's Saltivka district. He described it as a, quote, completely residential area with no military or infrastructure objects. Moscow denies targeting civilians but has regularly struck towns and cities behind the front lines. Alexei's mother was among the wounded.
There was a powerful explosion. Nearby apartment blocks shook. All the car alarms went off. I looked in the window and saw smoke billowing. I realized that it was my mother's building. I ran across the street with my wife and saw that my mother's apartment was on fire. The cars were on fire. Everything was broken.
Separately, local authorities said Moscow had launched a major drone attack on 15 Ukrainian regions. Residential and commercial buildings were severely damaged across the country. The Ukrainian Air Force said it had shot down 78 out of 105 Russian drones during the assault. That includes 15 in Kyiv during an air alert that lasted more than 5 hours. 23 more were likely impacted by active electronic jamming, the Air Force said.
U.S. dock workers and port operators reached a deal Thursday to end a crippling 3-day strike. The stoppage has shut down shipping on the East Coast and Gulf Coast. It's the biggest such walkout in nearly half a century, with analysts putting the cost to the economy at up to $5 billion per day. In all, 36 ports were affected, including New York, Baltimore, and Houston. Now, Reuters sources say the two sides have agreed to a pay hike of 62% over 6 years. The United States Maritime Alliance group of employers had previously offered close to 50%. In a statement, the union and port operators said they would now go back to the bargaining table to hammer out the remaining details. Among the key issues that remain is automation, which workers say will lead to job losses. International Longshoremen's Association boss Harold Daggett wants cargo shippers to stop projects that threaten employment. He says shipping lines like Maersk have refused to heed the demand. Now, a deal to end the strike will be a relief for President Joe Biden. He had sided with the dockers, calling on the shipping industry to share the bumper profits it's made in recent years. Biden had resisted calls from business groups and Republican lawmakers to use federal powers to end the stoppages, which they said threatened chaos for consumers. The strike has left at least 45 container vessels waiting to unload and came just as southeastern states were struggling for supplies following a deadly hurricane. On Thursday, the White House convened a virtual meeting of shipping line bosses, pressing them to agree to a quick deal following the storm. By midday, the shippers had agreed to make an improved pay offer.
Britain will give up sovereignty of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, it said on Thursday. However, it retains the use of the strategic airbase on Diego Garcia, jointly operated with the United States. Its operation is protected by the agreement. The deal would allow people displaced decades ago to return home and resettle the rest of the islands. It marks a change of approach to the issue from new British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. US President Joe Biden welcomed the deal and said it would secure the effective operation of the airbase into the next century. Britain has controlled the region since 1814. In 1965, it detached the Chagos Islands from Mauritius to create the British Indian Ocean Territory. It then evicted almost 2,000 residents to Mauritius and the Seychelles to make way for an airbase on the largest island, Diego Garcia. In 2019, a non-binding resolution in the United Nations General Assembly said Britain had wrongfully forced the population to leave and should give up control of the islands. Mauritius Foreign Affairs Ministry and Prime Minister's Office did not immediately respond to requests for comment.
Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba told his ministers to compile a fresh economic package Friday. His demand is aimed at helping households cope with rising living costs. The new Prime Minister was only sworn in this week and had previously been seen as a supporter of fiscal austerity. But he now stresses his new government's top priority is to exit deflation that has weighed down the country for 3 decades. Ishiba's move comes ahead of a general election.
We would need to support people suffering from rising costs right now, until a positive growth cycle with wage increases outpacing inflation and driving capital expenditures is established.
Ishiba told his cabinet on Thursday that a supplementary budget would be compiled to fund the package. It would come after lower house elections due in late October. He said the fresh package would include payouts to low-income households and subsidies to local governments. Ishiba also pledged to make efforts to boost the minimum wage by around half this decade. He said economic conditions have improved and wages have finally begun to grow after 3 lost decades that focused on cost cuts. But Ishiba added there was a long way to go before people felt safe to spend. He also vowed Friday to keep building ties with like-minded nations, including deeper security cooperation with South Korea. He said he would work with China where possible, while confronting it on issues of disagreement.
This community in Madagascar's Anjozoro Bay district has gathered to mourn victims of fatal kidnappings. A tragic escalation of such violence has gripped the region. Panjona Raheri Fololona was among 5 people abducted early August. Among those taken were a rice farmer, a teacher, and a recent graduate. Weeks later, when their families were unable to pay a $48,000 ransom, they were brutally murdered. Raheri Fololona's widow, Sarindra Andrea Tsarahasina, is now afraid to go to work.
My husband used to look after our children when he came back from the fields because I was working in the village. But now I don't dare leave our children. Their father is no longer there, and the lack of security makes it hard.
Madagascar is one of the world's poorest countries. The kidnappings worsen an already tense situation in an area classified as a red zone due to high levels of criminal activity. Law enforcement blamed the Dahalu, that's a name for rural bandits who have shifted from cattle rustling to human abduction, as livestock numbers in the area have declined. National police have upped their presence. But, they say, the vast expanse of the region poses severe challenges. 2 months since the kidnappings, the village is still gripped by grief and fear. Some farmers are scared to tend their fields. The headmaster of a local secondary school said several students have requested transfers.
The children are not the only victims. The teachers are also beginning to lose hope.
For Andrea Tsarahasina, she worries for her and her children's futures. We don't know what to do, where to go, she says. I followed my husband here, and he is dead.
U.S. stocks finished lower on Thursday as investors kept a watchful eye on the growing conflict in the Middle East. The Dow dropped more than 0.4%, the S&P 500 shed almost 0.2%, and the Nasdaq ended about flat. The Volatility Index, or VIX, Wall Street's fear gauge, rose to its highest closing level in about a month. With Middle East tensions deepening, along with a strike at U.S. East and Gulf Coast ports, George Ball, chairman of Sanders Morris, believes investors should be cautious.
I think that the cautious investor, and cautious investors may be called cowardly, but they often live to fight another day, is going to have a greater allocation to the fixed income markets than they did before. And they're going to invest more and shift their equity holdings toward the value sector and really away from the more romantic AI tech magnificent seven that have driven the markets over much of the first 8 months of the year.
Investors now await Friday's jobs report for September as they look for further clues about the size of the Federal Reserve's next rate cut. Stocks on the move included Constellation Brands, which fell 4.7% after the beer maker maintained its sales and profit forecast for fiscal year 2025. Levi Strauss shares fell more than 7.5% after a tepid forecast for holiday quarter revenue underscored the denim maker's struggles with sluggish demand from retailers. And shares of Tesla fell, extending losses from Wednesday when it reported that the number of third-quarter vehicle deliveries fell short of Wall Street's expectations.
Tesla will recall more than 27,000 Cybertrucks. The electric vehicle giant said Thursday that was due to delayed rear-view camera images. The issue could impair driver visibility and increase crash risks. Tesla said a software update would resolve the problem. The recall affects most Cybertrucks in the US and is the biggest one for the electric truck. Tesla issued a recall in April to fix a loose accelerator pedal pad and another in June over issues with windshield wipers and exterior trim. The EV maker started deliveries of the Cybertruck in November last year. Tesla has not disclosed the model's production or delivery numbers so far. CEO Elon Musk launched the Blade Runner-inspired truck to refresh the company's aging lineup amid slowing EV demand. Issues with the model are closely watched by investors due to the resources Tesla has invested in its development. The company said it identified the current issue early last month, and all Cybertrucks currently in production have received the software fix.
And I'll be there with you.
In a new court filing, U.S. prosecutors say Donald Trump, quote, resorted to crimes to stay in power. The 165-page document is likely the last opportunity for them to detail their case against Trump before the election. Here are some key findings. The filing lays out a sweeping account of Trump's conduct after the 2020 election.
4 more years!
That includes an allegation that a White House staffer heard Trump tell family members, quote, it doesn't matter if you won or lost the election. You still have to fight like hell. Another allegation was that Trump planned, even before the election, to declare victory, no matter the result, and replacing his campaign legal team when they allegedly wouldn't support allegations of voter fraud. The filing also claims Trump tried to manipulate Mike Pence into helping him stay in power. It also included an allegation that Trump warned Pence that people are, quote, gonna hate your guts and think you're stupid if Pence didn't block certification of Joe Biden's win. And prosecutors say that when a White House aide told Trump that Pence had been taken to a secure location as rioters stormed the Capitol, Trump responded, so what? Trump had pleaded not guilty to 4 criminal charges relating to the 2020 election interference case. if he wins the election, he's likely to direct the Justice Department to drop the charges.
Shein looks to be pressing ahead with plans for a share listing in London. Reuters sources say the China-founded online retailer will soon start holding informal roadshows across Europe. That's when a firm planning an initial public offering meets investors to test their appetite for shares. The process may determine whether the fast-growing company can match a $66 billion valuation secured last year. There was no comment on the report from Shein, which is now headquartered in Singapore. Reuters reported in June that the firm had confidentially filed papers with UK regulators, kicking off the IPO process. One source says it now plans to float shares in the current quarter, subject to approval from market watchdogs. Shein had planned to list in New York, but was warned against the move by Chinese regulators, who said it would run into trouble over questions regarding its supply chain. The firm has faced pushback from US lawmakers who have raised concerns regarding its labour standards. If the London sale does now go ahead, it would be a shot in the arm for the city's stagnant IPO market. The UK has seen just 9 new listings this year, or half the number in 2023. That leaves London in 10th place in Europe, the Middle East and Africa in terms of IPO value. UK regulators have this year fast-tracked new rules meant to lure listings and help close the gap with US and European bourses.
Trump was willing to sacrifice our capital to allow law enforcement officers to be beaten and brutalized in his name, and to violate the law and the Constitution in order to seize power for himself. I don't care if you are a Democrat or a Republican or an independent. That is depravity, and we must never become numb to it. I know that the most conservative of conservative values is fidelity to our Constitution. I tell you, I have never voted for a Democrat, but this year I am proudly casting my vote for Vice President Kamala Harris.
Today, the European Commission's proposal to impose definitive countervailing duties on imports of battery electric vehicles from China has obtained the necessary support from EU member states for the adoption of tariffs. This represents another step towards the conclusion of the Commission's anti-subsidy investigation. In parallel, the EU and China continue to work hard to explore an alternative solution that would have to be fully WTO compatible, adequate in addressing the injurious subsidisation established by the Commission's investigation, monitorable and enforceable.